A preliminary inquiry allows a defendant to test the evidence. It's a significant procedural step that most often is exercised if you plan on proceeding to trial. So the waiver of the preliminary inquiry was an important hallmark along the way, a message, as it were, to those in the know that potentially this might wrap up in a guilty plea. He is, after all, facing 8 counts of first-degree murder.
Mm-hmm. And talk to us about the penalty for that. What might he serve if he does enter a guilty plea, if the court accepts it? What type of sentence might he be looking at here?
So the automatic sentence for a first-degree murder conviction is 25 years. It's life with no eligibility for parole for 25 years. And then with multiple first-degree murder counts, he could be serving consecutive sentences with virtually no potential for parole. Arguably, they are bringing this to conclusion so that he might have some prospect of parole.
Explain that.
If he were to live for a further 25 years and somehow a deal had been engineered so that if he did plead guilty to all 8 counts or some of those counts, in exchange for being eligible for parole at 25 years. Mm-hmm. That's potentially what has been going on behind the scenes. I don't know, I'm not on the inside track. I'm just looking at the clues that are out there and trying to educate the viewer. So we'll know more very soon. I believe the court is supposed to kick off momentarily, 9:30. We'll have to wait and see what time Bruce McArthur arrives at the courthouse.
Yeah, and let's pick up on that point, because we do know that there are people inside the courthouse right now, family of victims. We know that the owners of the Mallory Crescent home, the central site of the investigation, are also in that courthouse. But at this point, we can tell you that Bruce McArthur is not yet in the courthouse. The court has just opened, but there are other matters on the docket before the McArthur case comes up. But that said, you know, I wanted you talk about the sentencing here and the fact that it could be consecutive, or there might be some room for a parole down the road. So even if he does, and this is a big if right now because we don't know for certain whether or not he's going to enter a guilty plea when he walks into that courtroom, but if he does enter a guilty plea, walk us through the process. What happens afterwards?
So what will happen if and when he arrives today? There's quite a significant snowstorm, and generally inmates are housed far away, so he may arrive late. But when he does arrive, he'll be brought in with the court guards. There'll be a bit of back and forth once again between the defense and the Crown, an acknowledgement from Justice McMahon that Bruce McArthur, the defendant, is there, and then they will start into, if in fact there is going to be a guilty plea, the judge will inquire of Mr. McArthur, Bruce McArthur, the defendant, whether or not what is about to proceed is done of his own free will and volition. Nobody's pressuring him to enter a plea. It's an inquiry that the judge is obliged to make, and Justice McMahon does it very well. Assuming that goes according to plan, that Bruce McArthur says he's doing it of his own free will, he's not being forced into this, he understands what he's doing, he understands that he's waiving his right to have a trial. Then, after that is concluded, they arraign him on the counts in the indictment that he's chosen to plead guilty to, and he will say guilty or not guilty. After that arraignment is taken, the Crown Attorney then reads in the statement of facts. In the normal course, when you're doing negotiated pleas, the statement of facts has been agreed to in advance. It's been hammered out. A lot of work goes into narrowing down, specifying the facts upon which the defendant will plead. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know if he'll be pleading to all 8 or just some of them, or what he might be saying by way of contributing factors, as it were.
And this all ahead of any sentencing hearing afterwards?
This is all ahead of any sentencing hearing afterwards.
So how long of a process are we still looking at here? And again, presupposing that he is going to enter a guilty plea here.
Probably this morning. It will be concluded this morning. Then, in addition, the victims and the people that have been affected by this have their opportunity to be included in the process and to have their say. That may take more time, but the actual arraignment and reading in of the agreed statement of facts should be concluded this morning. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Given the number of victims involved and the number of people affected by this, I'm not sure if it will be completed today or it may take an additional day.
Mm-hmm. If he had not actually waived his right to a preliminary inquiry, as you say, how much more time would have been added to this whole process?
If he had not waived his right to a preliminary inquiry, I expect that a preliminary hearing of this magnitude involving 8 separate homicides would have taken at a minimum 2 months of valuable court time, potentially even 3 months, going through the forensic evidence and all of the proof, because at a preliminary inquiry, the Crown is obliged to prove each of the essential elements of each count against a defendant. The time, the place, the who, and most importantly in homicides, the why, the motive part.
The motive part, as you say. Well, listen, Karen, I'm going to ask you to stay here with us. Don't leave right quite yet, as we are at this point, again, waiting for Bruce McArthur to arrive. As we said, the courts opened up about 5-6 minutes ago. Bruce McArthur is still not in there, although we can tell you that Hank Nzinga, the lead detective on this case, is now in the courthouse. He joins many interested parties, among them the families of the victims, as well as the owners of the Mallory Crescent property, which was the epicenter of the investigation that took place last year. Now, that said, the first of MacArthur's alleged victims disappeared nearly a decade ago, and it was only last year that police finally made an arrest. And with a look as to how this all came to where we are right now, let's bring in Megan Roberts right now. So walk us through what led us to this point here, Megan.
Michael, this was such a complicated case, and it actually encompassed 2 separate police investigations that then they later learned were connected, all in this one case. There are 8 different men that went missing and that were found murdered related to this case. And the first of those men went missing in 2010, the first of the victims. There were actually 2 men that went missing in 2010, the first connected to this case in or near Toronto's Gay Village. Then 2 years later in 2012, another man went missing. These are all of the victims together. Another man went missing in 2012, and that prompted police to create what was called Project Houston, the first major investigation that would be linked to this broader case, trying to figure out what happened to those 3 men, but they couldn't find anything. And after a year and a half, they closed Project Houston without discovering what had happened to those 3 men. Between 2015 and 2017, more men started disappearing, a total of 4, which led to a lot of fears in the LGBT community, a lot of fears about where these men were going. Many had ties to the Gay Village in Toronto. Many had fears about what was happening with these people disappearing off of the street. And in almost all of the cases except one, Abdul Bazir Faizi, it took a couple of days for these men to be reported missing officially to police. And in fact, 2 of the cases were never reported missing. But another man disappeared, Andrew Kinsman, in June of 2017. And I'm highlighting his case because he was reported missing within 72 hours. And police say that because of that, it revealed this key piece of evidence, a crucial piece of evidence that was able to move them forward in investigating this case. 2 months after Andrew Kinsman and Selim Essim disappeared, they established Project Prism to look into those 2 disappearances in 2017. In September of that year, they started tracking Bruce McArthur, and then they arrested him in January of 2018. Initially charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder, but those charges kept coming until eventually it was 8 counts of first-degree murder that he is alleged to have committed, according to police. We know that there were some pretty gruesome details in the investigation that police found. They discovered he had worked as a landscaper and that he was hiding remains in planters. There was another set of remains that was found in a ravine near a property where he had stored not only the planters, but where he had also stored some of his landscaping equipment. And we know that the amount of evidence that was found in this case is historic, the biggest case that police say they've ever investigated in Toronto. So it's an absolutely massive case, 2 major police investigations that ended up being linked back to this one bigger picture, and almost a decade of cases that all led up to this now court date, this major significant development that we're waiting to hear. As you mentioned, we know that he waived his right to a preliminary hearing. His trial was actually set to begin on January the 6th, 2020, officially expecting it to take 3 to 4 months, but we don't know what's going to happen today that could change that timeline, Michael.
Okay, Megan, thank you for that. Megan Roberts right here in studio. And we're joined once again by Karen Macarthur, who's a criminal defense lawyer here in Toronto. She joins us here to cover this next appearance from Bruce McArthur, the man, as we have been talking about, accused in 8 counts of first-degree murder. Now, I want to pick up on a point about victim impact statements. So we will, in all likelihood, hear from family members who lost loved ones in these alleged crimes. But what about the owners of the Mallory Crescent home? Will they be allowed to give a victim impact statement?
I would suspect they might be able to, because they have been grievously affected by this, not with the loss of loved ones, but with the loss of normal living, disruption to their home for the better part of a year and a half. So they're right front and center with how Bruce McArthur turned their urns upside down, as it were, planting human remains on their property.
Well, as we take a look at some of the video of the investigation, this truly was a big investigation, and it did center around their home. As you were watching that, as all of this was unfolding, what was going through your mind about the level and degree of investigation that was taking place around that property?
Very thorough. Top-notch forensic investigators were employed here. Detective Hank Nzinza is one of the best in the homicide unit. I've known him many years. So Toronto Police, albeit they were a bit late to catching the thread of what was going on here, because 8 men had disappeared over a course of many years. When they finally caught the thread in September of 2017, they did employ their best resources and bring it to conclusion, and perhaps potentially concluding it this morning.
And you know, we've been saying that a significant development was being promised by Toronto Police, and we're now hearing word that it is, and this was a speculation that there will be a guilty plea entered by Bruce McArthur when he enters that courtroom today. So the very fact, and I know we're going to go over some of the things that we've already touched upon, but once again, the significance of him going to that courtroom today to essentially plead guilt to all these counts of first-degree murder. How does this expedite the case then for the Crown?
Well, the way it had been scheduled was trial was supposed to occur in January of 2020, and it would have been probably a 4 or 5 month proceeding. So you're bringing it forward by a year, and you are not going to be spending 4 or 5 months litigating whether or not he did or didn't commit these murders, and whether or not he did or didn't intend to commit first-degree murder. He will be admitting and accepting, and there will be a significant saving of time and money, and a very great deal of solace, I would think, to the affected victims and their families, and the greater Toronto community. In fact, Canada will rest a little bit easier, I think, after the guilty pleas are accepted today.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Karen, to stay with us once again. But right now we want to go back to the University Courthouse. Megan Fitzpatrick is our reporter in front of the courthouse right now, part of the team that is covering this developing story. So Megan, talk to us about the latest happenings at the courthouse. What are you hearing right now?
Well, Michael, just that it is in session. Things got underway on time around 9:30, but Bruce McArthur's case wasn't the first one on the schedule. So from what I understand from my colleagues who are inside the courtroom, other matters are being dealt with first. McArthur is not in the courtroom yet, and we're not sure yet at what time his case will be dealt with. Sometimes there's just a few minutes in between one suspect being brought in, if that person's there in person, and the next one. So sometimes there's little pauses in between the proceedings. So Bruce McArthur has not been brought in yet. We're not sure if he's even in the building yet. It's hard for us to see where we are out front. I don't have eyes on the entrance where suspects are brought in. So no sign of him yet, and no indication of when they will be dealing with his case. But we know that the courtroom in there is quite full with a variety of people, including many media, of course, but also many members of the Toronto Police Service, including 2 of the key inspectors who worked on this case, Hank Nzinga and Dave Dickinson. I saw both of them go into the courtroom into the courthouse a little while ago. We also know the homeowners of the home where the remains of the men Bruce McArthur's accused of killing were found. They're there, as well as we believe friends of some of the victims. So that's basically what's going on here now, is just waiting for the other cases to be dealt with before Bruce McArthur's case is dealt with. No indication yet of when that will happen. We're keeping our eyes on our emails and our Twitter feeds, of course, Michael, to see what's going on in there. We do know, by the way, that the courtroom that this is being heard in this morning is a different one than the last time Bruce McArthur made a court appearance here just a few weeks ago. This one is being held on the 6th floor of this courthouse. It's a larger room than the one he usually appears in. So perhaps that's an indication too that the courthouse here was expecting a bigger crowd, and that's likely because of that indication that Toronto Police gave yesterday that there would be a significant development, that advisory that they put out. But of course, they didn't include any other details on what that significant development will be, and that's what we're waiting to learn this morning.
Okay. Megan, thank you for that. Appreciate it. And Megan is standing in front of the University Courthouse that is in downtown Toronto. Again, we are now waiting for the appearance of Bruce McArthur. As we heard from Megan, Toronto Police said it would be significant development, and at this point we are expecting that he will enter a guilty plea to the 8 counts of first-degree murder to which he is accused. We are tracking the very latest on this story for you right here on CBC News Network. Do stay with us. Much more to come. Welcome back. We are following right now the next court appearance of Bruce McArthur, the man accused in the first-degree murders of 8 men who have connections with Toronto's gay community. We are expecting a significant development as described by Toronto Police. We can now tell you that we believe that Bruce McArthur will be entering a guilty plea when he makes his court appearance in downtown Toronto. We are covering the story from many different angles. We have reporters in the court room right now. We also have court reporters outside the courthouse itself in downtown downtown Toronto. And as we wait for Bruce McArthur to actually walk into that room, we have invited here criminal defense lawyer Karen Macarthur. She is in studio with me. And let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about the case, but I want to talk a bit about the courtroom in which this is taking place. It is courtroom 6-1, which seems to have some significance for those who work in the criminal law system in this country.
It's the jewel of the 361 courthouse, which is the Toronto Superior Court. It's where judge and jury trials are heard. Many courtrooms at 361 do hear judge and jury cases, but court 6-1 is sort of the hallowed halls. It's a very significant courtroom. The Just Desserts courtroom was litigated there. I spent a significant amount of time there while I was involved in that case. Paul Bernardo's matter was heard there, and Bruce McArthur's matter is being held there today. It's large, the ceilings are high, it just has a real feeling of tradition and it being sacrosanct, where truth is achieved.
Mm-hmm. And also we're hearing from John Lancaster, one of our reporters who's on the ground right now, that there seems to be a high level of security at the courthouse today. Talk to us about that. What about this case requires a higher level of security?
Well, 361 does have rigorous security controls. Anyone entering the building is wanded. If you are a professional lawyer, you show your card and you can bypass that. Most of the courtrooms now also have metal detectors and wanding facilities outside of the courtroom in the event that something of import may or may not be occurring in there. Gang-type cases, murder cases. In this case, security will be tight because you don't want any type of retributive justice or vigilante justice, and this case with the killing of 8 men in the Toronto community in the Church Street corridor does bring about a lot of feelings of revulsion and might trigger people to do things that are not correct. And so it's good that we have security on high alert there. We've got the wanding machines, the metal detectors, because we don't want anything to go awry. We don't want anybody to stand up and get their own piece of Bruce McArthur. That's what the justice system is for. That's what our prisons are for. We don't believe in vigilante justice in this country. And that's why we have security on high alert in a case such as this.
Mm-hmm. And you know, you're talking about the type of crimes that are heard in this courtroom, and we know that the first case on the docket actually had to do with the killing of two and wounding of 3 others in Toronto's Chinatown district. So that was, again, the type of cases that are heard here. Just give me a second here, because this is from John Lancaster. And again, John Lancaster is one of our reporters that is right now inside the courthouse itself. And this is what he is putting out right now on his Twitter feed. He says, "It appears a full agreed statement of facts may not be entered as evidence in court today. However, we will get a brief overview of the 8 killings McArthur's alleged to have committed." What do you take out of that tweet, that there will not be an agreed statement of facts read out today?
What I take from that is there may be the inquiry from Judge McMahon, Justice John McMahon, of Bruce McArthur as to whether or not this is a plea that's going to go through of his own volition without pressure, and the arraignment, and Bruce McArthur pleading guilty or not guilty to each of the 8. That would be a snapshot of the crime. Potentially, more time will be involved to have the full agreed statement of facts. It does happen from time to time that there's just a partial glimpse, and then the matter gets remanded for a fuller outline of the facts that the defendant or the accused is prepared to accept. It might be the case that they're still hammering it out.
And is that because we're dealing with 8 counts of first-degree murder? Does that necessarily make it more complicated?
Absolutely, because each count is significant in and of itself. Don't forget that the Crown Attorney has the obligation to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each of the essential elements for each of those 8 counts. It's not additive. It's not simply the case that because he's pled guilty to count 1, that he is necessarily guilty of all 8. Bruce McArthur has to, through his counsel, admit to each one separate and apart from the other. So it may well be the case that he doesn't admit to all 8. We don't actually know. We're looking into the future, and we'll have to see what reveals itself as the day unfolds if and when Bruce McArthur arrives, because we did have quite a snowstorm last night.
Absolutely. And then again, to underline the fact that we are at this point future casting, because we don't know. Again, Toronto Police, all they've said thus far is that a significant development would be unveiled today in the courthouse, which is why people are paying attention to this. And in addition to the fact this is about Bruce McArthur, a man who was accused of being a serial killer. You and I are about to run out of time. I have to point out we're going to continue coverage here, so Hannah Marchand will take over the top of the clock. But I do want to touch upon one thing, and this is a more personal matter, because one of the men that MacArthur is accused of killing is a man that you knew quite well.
I didn't know him quite well, but I certainly knew him to say hello. I saw him at our neighborhood coffee shop. I saw him walking his dog. He would always nod his head and say hello. He was just part of my inner community. When I saw the posters, they were posted on the wooden poles, the electrical poles, announcing that he was missing, Andrew Kinsman was missing, and when he was last seen, it hit me hard in the stomach, the way things like this do, and it made me fear for my personal safety and the safety of my neighbors and my immediate family. You like to believe that Toronto is the good and the safe, but when someone just goes missing in the middle of the night with no explanation, it is obviously upsetting, and it hit me hard. And I believe you lived in the neighborhood at the time, and you too saw the posters on the wooden poles and sort of took a step back and were unsettled. Absolutely unsettled.
Without a doubt, and it was unsettling, and because I did at the time live, as you say, near the neighborhood in which Andrew Kinsman lived and where the posters were put up. A lot of focus given as well, because as we say, of the people he's accused of killing, Bruce McArthur is accused of killing, they had ties to the gay community, the gay village in downtown Toronto, not that far at all from where you live and where I lived at the time. So very much many people paying attention to this. Right now I'm going to bring in Megan Roberts. I'm going to thank you, Karen. Karen McArthur, again, defense lawyer, who's going to stay with us throughout the morning. But right now, Megan, give us an idea of how we have come to this point as we wait for Bruce McArthur to make his court appearance.
It's such a long and complex case, Michael. There are 8 victims, 8 missing men that disappeared over the span of almost a decade. There were 2 major police investigations that eventually were connected in this one case. So I'll try to lay out very quickly, chronologically, what happened. So we know in 2010, that is when the first men went missing that became connected to this case. The first victims in this case went missing in 2010, 2 of them from in or around Toronto's gay village. A third man went missing in 2012, and that is when police began Project Houston, the first of those 2 major investigations, to look into what happened to these now 3 missing men. But Project Houston didn't find anything, and they ended up closing it after only a year and a half without any resolution. Between 2015 and 2017, another 4 men went missing, and as you just talked about, that sparked a lot of worry in Toronto, and specifically within that community, the LGBT community and people who live in the neighborhood, because they were seeing some of these missing posters, and they were seeing people that they knew, and there was no explanation. And there were some people that were really worried that this could be part of a greater pattern. Andrew Kinsman, we just mentioned, went missing in June of 2017, and he was reported missing within 72 hours. And that's significant because police say, due to that short time period between when he was last seen and when he was reported missing, they were able to find, or a piece of key evidence was revealed. So it was significant that he was reported within 72 hours. That allowed the police to move the case forward. Later that summer, they created Project Prism to look into 2 of the disappearances in 2017. And then in January 2018, they arrested Bruce McArthur, initially charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder. We now know that that ended up being a total of 8 counts of first-degree murder. And now we're hearing potentially he could enter a plea today, though of course that is very much not confirmed, Michael.
Not confirmed, as you Not confirmed, as you say, Megan, but thank you for that. Or Megan Roberts here in studio. Now, we continue to watch what is happening at the University Courthouse in downtown Toronto. Again, Toronto police have said something significant would happen. We are expecting that Bruce McArthur will actually enter a guilty plea for the crimes of which he is charged. 8 counts of first-degree murder of men who are all tied to the gay community in downtown Toronto. Our coverage of this breaking news story continues right here on CBC News Network. Taking over right now, my colleague Suhana Marchand with the breaking news. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us today. Now over to Suhana.
Thank you, Michael. Suhana here. We are watching for Bruce McArthur to appear in this Toronto court any minute now. The alleged serial killer is expected to plead guilty. We will certainly bring you the latest because we've got eyes on. Hello to you. This is CBC News Network. Lots of anticipation in Toronto. That man accused of a series of murders, most of them connected to the city's gay village, will appear in that courtroom you just saw. Police say, and this is key, they expect him to plead guilty. We've got CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick. She is right outside that courthouse. What's happening there right now? Because I can see cameras, of course, set up on the sticks, but empty of people, Megan.
Yeah, we're set up here, Suhana, because this is the exit of the courthouse. So whenever the hearing is over, this is right behind me, the exit that we're expecting people to come out and hopefully talk to us and tell us what happened in there and give us their reaction. Earlier this morning, we were around the corner a little bit at the front entrance of the courthouse. That's where people have to go through security to get in there. And people did start arriving early this morning. Lots of different people here for this Bruce McArthur hearing that was set to begin around 9:30. We did see some of the key detectives in the case going in, Hank Zinga among them. He was the lead detective on this case. Also, some community activists from Toronto's gay village who have been following this case closely, as well as friends, we believe, of some of the victims, as well as the homeowners on Mallory Crescent. That's where the remains of the victims were found. Some of them in large garden planters in the garage, the remains of an 8th victim in the ravine behind the home. We know they're in the courthouse as well. Suhana, a large crowd, so large in fact that today's hearing was moved to a different courtroom, the largest courtroom in this courthouse on University Avenue. That's a different space than Bruce McArthur usually makes his court appearances. The last time he was in court was just a few weeks ago, and basically where his case is at. Last fall, he waived his right to a preliminary hearing, which essentially fast-tracked the case a little bit, and a trial date was set for 2020. January of 2020. And so these latest court appearances are happening because his defense attorney, the Crown attorneys, and the judge meet periodically to discuss where the case is at. Then Bruce McArthur makes an appearance and they essentially fill him in and then set another court date. So today's court date was set a few weeks ago, but it was yesterday that the Toronto police put out a statement, an unusual statement, saying that there would be a significant development here this morning. That is not something they usually do, and they have been pretty tight-lipped. The last time I was here for Bruce McArthur's last appearance, the detectives in the case not wanting to talk to us, and they didn't say anything to us on their way in this morning either. No further details in that statement from Toronto Police about what the significant development would be. And as you mentioned, Suhana, Bruce McArthur hasn't entered a plea yet to the 8 charges that he is facing. These are 8 first-degree murder charges in connection to the deaths of 8 men who disappeared between 2010 and 2017. Bruce McArthur was arrested a little over 1 year ago today, initially charged with 2 murders, and as the police continued to investigate, that eventually spread to the 8 charges. And as I mentioned, the remains of those 8 men eventually recovered, all at that site of that one home where Bruce McArthur worked as a landscaper, a self-employed landscaper. And again, the homeowners are in the court this morning. So the hearing began around 9:30, but Bruce McArthur's case was not the first one to be dealt with, Suhana. There are some other matters first. So we are awaiting Bruce McArthur to enter the courtroom. And my colleagues are in there sending me updates.
Just on that point, Megan, we are getting an update from one of our CBC reporters who was inside that courtroom. As I understand it right now, court is just on hold while officers have been sent down to the holding cell to bring Bruce McArthur up to that courtroom. So they are ready to go very shortly. As you wait, there are lots of people who are waiting along with you. What's the mood there? I mentioned the word anticipation. Is that the correct word?
Sure. I mean, here it's just media, Suhana, so we're anticipating covering it. But so I'm sure the mood inside the courtroom is very different than it is out here. But we did speak this morning to one of those community activists on his way in. I did a quick chat with him, and he was telling us for sure a sense of anticipation and kind of anxiety, not knowing what is going to happen at this courtroom today. But he did say he wanted to be here to see it for himself, and he was hoping that Bruce McArthur would be entering a guilty plea this morning. He said that would help perhaps bring some closure to this case, which obviously has gone on for a very long time. And he said that that would be helpful for the community to heal. The man I talked to was friends with several of the victims, so of course very impacted by this case. And so a lot of people wondering, speculating, anticipating what would happen in the court. But as for the mood out here, it's just reporters here right now. So hard to tell what the mood is like in there. We know that there is extra security, more so than usual at the courthouse. Santa usually just go through a metal detector at the front entrance of the building, but I understand from my colleagues they had extra security as well outside the actual courtroom. That's something that's unusual. So that does change the mood a little bit, I think, at the courthouse here. Makes it a little different than past court appearances by Bruce McArthur.
All right, Megan, stand by. We'll get back to you. Megan Fitzpatrick is right outside the courthouse. Inside studio, we're also following this story, and Karen Macarthur is with me. She's a criminal defense lawyer. She is based in Toronto. You've certainly been watching these events unfold, and you're watching along with us here in our newsroom and, of course, all of our viewers at home. That process of bringing an accused from the holding cell up to court, what's the security like, and what's the, what happens?
So he'll be brought up from the bowels of the courthouse with 2 or more court security officers that work with the Toronto Police Service. They will bring him up through the elevator system and down. There's a very long hallway that's adjacent to Court 6-1 that the regular personnel don't enter. It's reserved for court personnel and defendants. He will enter into the court through there. It can take about 10 minutes.
Will he be handcuffed, shackled? What's the situation?
In the normal course, the answer to that is yes. When jury trials are conducted, most often the shackles are removed. So juries, when they are determining guilt or innocence, don't see the shackles. But when he is brought physically into the courtroom, he will most undoubtedly be shackled at the feet and at the hands. And so it's a slow shuffle.
It's a slow shuffle in, and then sit in a secure booth or sit at the defense table?
I would believe in this case he'll be sitting in the secure booth.
All right. Inside the courtroom, if that is full, the justice is obviously going to ask first what? First for the lawyer? Is there a plea, or will the justice speak directly to the person who is accused?
The first thing that will occur is that the lead Crown attorney will stand up and introduce himself to Justice
Just going to jump
McMahon.
in, Karen, because you mentioned it does take some time. Well, that shuffle has happened. Bruce McArthur is now in court, so that's the word we're getting from our colleagues inside that courtroom. Apparently his head is shaved, his beard is also shaved, looking shaken and hunched over, and apparently looking, from the words of my colleague inside that courtroom, looking older than his 67 years of age. So you know that Bruce McArthur is facing 8 counts of first-degree murder. He has been imprisoned, and today was supposed to be that court appearance, which it is. So head shaven, face shaven, in the courtroom right now. We'll certainly be listening for what comes out of that courtroom. Let me set the lay of the land for you. We've got reporters outside of the courthouse who can give us a sense of what the reaction is as soon as we know what's happening inside. We've got Karen Macarthur, who is a criminal defense lawyer, right here in studio to help us to understand the process and what is at stake here when it comes to pleas. We have heard from the police. They expected, yesterday they said a significant development. Today we're hearing they expect Bruce McArthur to plead guilty. Now, we do know he is charged with 8 counts. The question is, will he plead guilty to all of those 8 counts? I want to continue my conversation with Karen. In that courtroom, you mentioned the judge will address whom? sorry, Karen, I don't mean to be rude, but we are hearing that Bruce McArthur, and this is breaking news, Bruce McArthur will enter a guilty plea on all 8 counts. So if you are just joining us, that is the breaking news coming from Toronto. Bruce McArthur is pleading guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. That is an automatic life sentence. So we will certainly be watching for reaction from Toronto's gay community, reaction from the lawyers who were involved on both sides of this case. Bruce McArthur, who is 67 years old, is pleading guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. The accusations came from police that Bruce McArthur preyed on men who disappeared from Toronto's gay village between 2010 and 2017. You're looking at pictures of Bruce McArthur right now. Inside the courtroom does not look like the same man. We've got colleagues inside the courtroom who say Bruce McArthur, when he arrived shackled into that courtroom to put that plea of guilty in, that his head was shaved, that his face was shaved, that he was hunched over, looking in fact older than his 67 years of age. Now, last year, he waived his right to a preliminary hearing. He opted to go straight to trial. That trial had been set for a year from now, January of 2020. So with this plea of guilty on 8 counts, it looks like there will not be a trial in Toronto for Bruce McArthur. I've got Karen McArthur, no relation, by the way. She is a criminal defense lawyer, and she is right here giving us, the lay of the land, if you will. What does this mean in the case now that Bruce McArthur, we know, is pleading guilty to all of those 8 counts of first-degree murder?
It means a big sigh of relief for Canada, Toronto, and the family members that lost their loved ones, and for the gay village to know they can sleep now knowing that the serial killer has admitted guilt and is off the streets for the rest of his life. It's concluding, and we save a significant amount of trial time.
Now, he has just said that he is pleading guilty voluntarily to these charges, that he is giving up knowingly the right to a trial. That trial would have taken 3 to 4 months, is what we had heard when it was set.
Potentially even longer, because of the great amount of forensic evidence that was involved in this case.
So saving not only the emotions, I suppose, but money for the city.
Huge money, because it comes out of the public coffers. That's how you keep the lights on in the courtroom. That's how you pay the judges. That's how you pay the Crown Attorney and the court reporters. So huge savings.
What would have been the discussions prior to this? So I want to bring our viewers up to date here on CBC News Network. This is breaking news we are tracking for you. You know the name Bruce McArthur, certainly if you live in Toronto, but across the country as well. He was an alleged serial killer of 8 counts of first-degree murder. He has now, today, minutes ago, pleaded guilty to all 8 counts of first-degree murder. He says he knowingly waives his right to a trial, and he is voluntarily pleading guilty. So that's the news we are tracking right now. I've got Karen McArthur here in studio with me, who says that in this city there is a sigh of relief. There will be a lot of money saved from the public purse in this guilty plea from Bruce McArthur. But the emotions of this story will certainly continue and weigh very heavily. The victims' names right now in court are being read out. You could probably hear a pin drop inside that courtroom. What's going through people's minds right now? I mean, for a lawyer who's been in that situation, what's the feeling in a courtroom when somebody comes in and does plead guilty?
There is a feeling of relief and yet revulsion. And pain, real human pain, because you cannot step away from the reality that human beings died at the hands of the person before the court. And it's a bewildering place to be. It's a bewildering process as we try to hammer these things out. So both the Crown Attorney, the police, the defense lawyer, and the judge, they all are going through these feelings. I've been in that situation myself when I've had a defendant plead guilty to the death of a human being. It's a difficult place to be, and yet at the same time, as you're part of the process, if you're arriving at an appropriate solution for the justice system and the public, collectively, you feel that you're doing good. The victims, who will be 1 or 2 rows behind Bruce McArthur, their hearts will be a bit lighter. I bet you they will feel as if they're just operating in a cloud right now, because they probably have this real sense of disbelief. Is this moment actually occurring? They've been steeling themselves with courage to get through this, expecting to have a trial in January of 2020, and then just out of the blue, this has occurred. And it's coming to conclusion. So it's an odd space for them to be in mentally and emotionally, but I'm sure they're relieved.
It certainly sounds like an incredible story that perhaps now has an ending. If the word closure can't be used, the story for them perhaps has ended. But I want to thank you, Karen, for your insight. If you can stay with us, I want to take us back right now, along with our viewers, to Megan Fitzpatrick, who is standing by live right outside that courthouse. And you've heard from our colleagues, as I have, Megan, that Bruce McArthur has pleaded guilty to all 8 counts of first-degree murder. He says he is doing so voluntarily, and that he is voluntarily waiving that right to a trial. What else are you hearing there?
Yeah, just the judge, that's sort of the process, Suhanna, from what I understand. The judge having to ask him if he basically understands what he's doing by pleading guilty, that by doing so he's waiving his right to a trial. That trial had been set for about 1 year from now in January of 2020. Also hearing from my colleagues inside that he is asked if he understands that this essentially means he is going to jail for the rest of his life, that he would be 91 years old before being eligible to apply for parole. He was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. A conviction of first-degree murder means an automatic life sentence of 25 years with no chance for parole. Given that he's pleading guilty to 8 counts, the next question will be whether those life sentences are served concurrently or consecutively, Suhanna, but that question will come later at a sentencing hearing. From what I'm hearing from my colleagues inside, Bruce McArthur has said very little other than answering in the affirmative to the questions that the judge has been asking him, and that he is expressionless as the court clerk is reading out the names of the 8 victims that he has now just pleaded guilty to murdering. And that's all I'm seeing for now. Just that he has now repeated the word guilty to 8 times to the 8 charges as they were read out. So that's where we're at right now, Suhanna, and watching for further updates. We are outside the courtroom at 361 University. My colleagues inside on the 6th floor of this building in a larger courtroom, the largest courtroom in this building, a different space than Bruce McArthur usually makes his court appearances. So we'll keep watching for any more updates as this proceeding goes on.
All right, thanks for that, Megan. Stick around, we'll talk again. For our viewers who are just joining us here on CBC News Network, we are tracking breaking news coming out of Toronto with national implications, because we're talking about a serial killer, a man named Bruce McArthur, who has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder, all related to Toronto's gay village. He said the word guilty 8 times in court as those charges were read against him. He will now serve a life sentence. He will be in jail until he's 91, until he is eligible for parole. I've got Karen Macarthur, who is a criminal defense lawyer. She is based in Toronto, and no relation, by the way, to Bruce McArthur. I do want to make that clear. We are getting some other facts right now, Karen. Police, what we're hearing from court is the men were dismembered. They were murdered and then dismembered. That is coming and being read out by the Crown right now. So I'm hearing information that there were body parts buried in a ravine and also in large planters. We've been talking about that horrific part of the story. Apparently, Bruce McArthur also kept souvenirs. Does any of this surprise you in the field in which you are?
It's highly disturbing. I must say, I haven't encountered a serial killer in my almost 30 years. I have read about the patterns of serial killers, and he fits within the pattern in terms of the dismemberment and also the repetition and the keeping souvenirs. So in that regard, it's not surprising, but to actually have him admit to it is horrifying, and a punch in the gut to everyone that lives in the gay village, in the Greater Toronto community, and across Canada. Our innocence most certainly has been taken away, with this man living in our midst and going under the radar for a full 7 years while he perpetrated 8 murders.
And we can now say he killed those men because Bruce McArthur has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. Karen, you mentioned that was from the years 2010 to 2017 in Canada's largest city, in the LGBTQ community here in the downtown core. And now that Bruce McArthur has pleaded guilty, there are elements and facts being read out by lawyers in the court. One of them is that in McArthur's apartment there was a bag that was discovered containing a syringe and duct tape. Those bits of information that we are now gleaning, is that because he pleaded guilty and because it can now all come out?
Yes, because prior to that, the fruits of the police investigation were shared only with the defense. And then they would have been discussed with Judge McMahon, the defense and the Crown, in multiple meetings while they tried to hammer it out. But the actual facts or the disclosure or the fruits of the investigation were not shared with the public or the press because they didn't want to taint any potential trial. So they kept the facts as they were discovering them close to their chest and only shared them with the defense. And now we get to hear the horrifying facts, the syringe and the duct tape. And
when you use the word horrifying, it certainly is. And I do want to warn our viewers who perhaps are just joining us here on CBC News Network that we are talking about a horrific case of 8 murders that a man in Toronto, Bruce McArthur, has pleaded guilty to. And now we're getting information about how those men were killed. So I'm going to give you this warning, and you at home can decide how you listen to this information. We do know that the bodies were found dismembered. We do know police found some of the victims in planters in a home in Toronto. There were also body parts found in a ravine in Toronto. We do know that Bruce McArthur, and this is information coming from the courtroom right now because Bruce McArthur has pleaded guilty, so these facts are coming out. We do know that he kept some jewelry belonging to the victims, the 8 men he killed. There are other more gruesome details of the crimes that are being released in court, and perhaps this is not the place to share those details. I'm having a hard time using some of the words that my colleagues are listening to in court, but suffice it to say that those bodies were sexually mutilated and dismembered, and then you've heard many parts found in planters in a home in Toronto. I've got Karen McArthur here in studio with me, and you're a criminal lawyer, no relation, by the way, to Bruce McArthur. How does a community, hearing those facts and perhaps always wondering, you know, what did the investigation find? Did he do it? And maybe some people said, you know, yes, he did do it before he even pleaded guilty. But now that he has, is there some kind of thunk in the pit of the stomach of those who are friends or family of the victims and in the LGBTQ community itself?
Today, when the agreed statement of facts is being read in, as it is right now, and the horrifying facts are being heard for the first time by the victims, by the family members, by the community members, I would think there's more than a thunk. I would think there's a thunk that is full of revulsion and disgust and shock that a human being could do this to not just one other human being, but repeated 8 times. I would also think that at some level, people wonder about any other lost souls over the last decade.
And those questions
that have just not been discovered, you know, because there are.
Let me ask you this,
murders.
though. Would Bruce McArthur, if he has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder, would his legal team have then said, is there other information you could share, perhaps to mitigate some of the sentencing? And would that happen between now and we're hearing the sentencing, by the way, is set for next week, and there will be victim impact statements before that sentencing? Could that be some of the discussion that happens between Bruce McArthur and his legal team
It is something that could be discussed, absolutely. And if he were willing to say, yes, I recall that it wasn't just 8 bodies that I dismembered, and here I'm just speculating.
Of course we are. We know he's killed 8 men.
That's what he's admitted to today. If I had been his defense counsel, I would likely have broached that in terms of, is there anything that we can offer to the police in terms of wrapping this thing up? Because the only bargaining chip he has is whether or not he gets a concurrent life sentences or consecutive life sentences. We know with any first-degree murder, it's life, eligible for parole after 25, which brings him to 91. But because he's got 8 first-degree murders, they can apply consecutive sentences, which would mean he never has any hope of seeing the light of day. Arguably,
how often is that the case, though, where consecutive sentences rather than a concurrent life sentence is given by the judge?
It is a new tool that is available to judges and prosecutors, and it has been utilized. I anticipate that it will be utilized here. I would anticipate.
So where does Bruce McArthur go from here? We know he's in shackles. He's in the courtroom. He pleaded guilty. He said that word 8 times. He said he voluntarily is pleading, that he knowingly is giving up the right to a trial. So this is all in the bag right now. What happens next?
He will have an opportunity to express his views, potentially apologize, potentially offer some apologia or explanation for this aberrant behavior. I don't know what it is that he could offer up, or he could simply remain absolutely silent, and then when Judge McMahon imposes the sentence. But Judge McMahon will ask him if he has anything to say before passing sentence. Where he will go, well, absolutely he's going to prison. I would suspect he will be held in secure quarters, because a person that has sexually mutilated and killed 8 people is food for fodder in the prisons.
Right.
They really can't be released into the general population. So
I want to talk more about that with you. Will you stay with me, and we'll go back to Megan Fitzpatrick. She is outside of the courthouse in Toronto. You're probably waiting for people to come out. We do know, Megan, that for those who are just joining us, can you give us the update, the latest on this breaking news on Bruce McArthur?
Yeah, well, it sounds like, Suhanna, he has now, as we know, pleaded guilty to all 8 counts of first-degree murder. The names of the victims were all read out in court. As you mentioned, the judge was asking Bruce McArthur if he understands what he's doing, basically, if he felt any pressure to do this or if he's pleading guilty voluntarily. He answered yes to all those questions when the judge was addressing him. Also asked if he understood that by pleading guilty that he is waiving his right to a trial, and that essentially he could now be in jail for the rest of his life. He would be 91 years old before eligible to apply for parole. A conviction of a first-degree murder charge does come with an automatic life sentence of 25 years before having the chance to apply for parole. Now it will be up to the judge to decide whether these 8 convictions will be served concurrently or consecutively, and that will be determined at a later date. We are hearing that the sentencing will happen on February 4th, and at that time there will be victim impact statements as well as the sentencing. And so we're hearing from inside the courtroom now that there's discussion of getting some interpreters to be on hand at that sentencing hearing, and for the victim impact statements, because several of the men who were some of the victims were not from Canada originally. We're also hearing that an agreed statement of facts will be filed, and that really will give us even more details than we're hearing already this morning in terms of how these murders were carried out, what evidence police gathered against Bruce McArthur. One report from inside the courtroom, Suhanna, I'm seeing says that a big break in the case came when security cameras showed Andrew Kinsman getting into Bruce McArthur's van. Andrew Kinsman, one of the 8 men who was murdered, and that DNA was found in the van. So some of the facts of the case have been read in the courtroom this morning. The judge asking McArthur if the allegations are true, and he, I believe, answered yes to that. But we will get a fuller picture of exactly what happened when the fuller agreed statement of facts is filed in court, which we are expecting next week. So the hearing is still continuing. I'm just watching for more updates on my phone. Macarthur in the courtroom. He's apparently wearing a gray sweater, plaid shirt. He's standing in the courtroom now, and I believe things are wrapping up. I'm just hearing from one of my colleagues in the courtroom, Suhanna. So if that's the case, we will be expecting people to be coming out of this exit of the courthouse here on University Avenue. We have our microphones set up. We're expecting to hear from a range of people. We know some of the key detectives who worked on this case are here. They have been for many of Bruce McArthur's court appearances. Also, the homeowners are here, the place where the remains of the 8 murder victims were found. Most of them, their remains found in large garden planters that had been stored in the garage of the home. The remains of the 8th man found in the ravine behind the home. So we'll wait and see if they want to speak to reporters as well. And then friends and family, of course, as well, will be here and hopefully sharing their thoughts on what must be a very emotional day for them today.
Absolutely. And Megan, I'm hearing court, as you said, has adjourned. That means those who are in court, lawyers as well, who perhaps are not dealing with whatever Bruce McArthur as a client has to do next, but they will start coming outside of that building to you, Megan. I do see a podium set up where you can see all the microphones there for our viewers and reporters, of course, standing by. So, Megan, I'm going to let you make sure that you don't miss something out there and get one of those comments or scrums that happen for us. There are also, as I understand it, Megan, members of the LGBTQ community who have been following this court case very closely, and I'm sure there's got to be a real sense of emotion and perhaps relief as they leave that courtroom today. What exactly did he plead guilty to? Remind us.
Yeah, and just to backtrack, I just want to throw in there that we did speak to one of those community members before the hearing began this morning, Suhanna, and he said he was hoping to hear a guilty plea by Bruce McArthur this morning, that would really help the community in its healing process, because they, of course, have been hit very hard by what's happened. This man I spoke to knew several of the victims, and so he talked a little bit about them and just how difficult this past year has been, how he misses his friends, but that he was hoping to hear a guilty plea from Bruce McArthur. So that is what he heard this morning. 8 times Bruce McArthur apparently answered guilty to the 8 charges. They were 8 first-degree murder charges. He was arrested more than a year ago, just to recap a little bit of the case, arrested here in Toronto. He lived in an apartment here, and he was initially charged with 2 murders, and then as police continued their investigation, they kept laying more and more charges until it was eventually 8 murder charges. He was at the time accused of killing 8 men who disappeared between the years of 2010 and 2017. Many of them had ties to Toronto's gay village, but it wasn't until 2018 that he was arrested, and police undertook in Toronto one of the biggest forensic investigations they've ever had to deal with. It included an extensive search of Bruce McArthur's apartment, and then, of course, an extensive search of that property. Bruce McArthur, 67 years old right now, worked as a self-employed landscaper, and he did store some of his equipment at that home. The couple that own the home have known Bruce McArthur for more than a decade. He provided landscaping services to them in exchange for storing their equipment. The police investigation scouring the garage of that home for forensic evidence, as well as the ravine beside the home as well. So this has been a huge case for the Toronto police to handle, Suhanna. I'm just seeing that there's at least 20 police officers in the court right now watching the proceedings, or I guess on their way out shortly. So huge interest from them, of course, to see a resolution on the case that they've been working on. Particularly for that, the lead detective, Hank Azinga. He's spoken to CBC many times, just most recently a few weeks ago on the 1-year anniversary of Bruce McArthur's arrest. He has talked a lot about how it's impacted him personally and the Toronto Police Force working on this case. We quite likely will hear from him when he comes out, Suhanna, and from some of the other members of the police, potentially, the Crown lawyer perhaps, who worked on this case as well, maybe even Bruce McArthur's defense lawyer. Not sure if we'll hear from him as well, but quite likely, yes, there will be friends of the victims who will speak to us as well and share their thoughts with us.
I know you're watching for that. And Megan, while you're keeping an eye out there in front of the courthouse in Toronto, I've got Karen Macarthur, no relation, who is a criminal defense lawyer based in Toronto. And she's sitting with me in studio, Megan. So we'll keep an eye out on that box as well on the bottom of the screen, along with our viewers, so that if we see somebody coming out, we'll stop our conversation.
How much time? Because my camera wants to
If we could turn down
reposition.
Megan's microphone, then her personal conversations about getting on the air don't go out to our viewers. Criminal defense lawyer, as I mentioned, Karen Macarthur is here. And Karen, Megan talked about defense lawyers waiting for them to come to that group of that microphone that has been set up there, the Unimic. How much do lawyers in this position, the defense lawyers of Bruce McArthur, want to come out and share their conversations with the client? Is it important to do that?
It's case by case. I can't tell you whether or not defense counsel in this case will come out and offer anything. It might be that they wait until the conclusion of the matter on Monday and have a few words, or they may have more than a few words. They really have to operate and continue to operate in the best interests of their client, regardless of the heinous crimes that he's just admitted to. So it might not be in his best interest for them to go out and make many statements at all.
One of the words you used, Karen, was emotional, that this is a very emotional day. And I just want to explore that a little bit more in terms of how it has affected people's hearts. Our Chase team has reached a friend of Andrew Kinsman on the phone. Now, Andrew Kinsman is one of Bruce McArthur's victims, one of the men Bruce McArthur has said he killed. He pleaded guilty to the killing of Andrew Kinsman today and 7 other men. Nicole Borthwick is on the phone, and Nicole helped to coordinate a community search after her friend Andrew Kinsman went missing. And we've got Nicole on the phone right now. Nicole, it's Suhanna in Toronto. Breaking news that Bruce McArthur is pleading guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. He will go to prison at the least for 25 years, at the most, if he gets consecutive, for 200 years. What is in your heart as you hear this news today? Nicole, can you hear me? It's Suhanna.
Yes.
What are you feeling? What is in your heart today, Nicole, as you hear Bruce McArthur say he did it to 8 counts of first-degree murder? Hi, Nicole.
Yes.
I'm just going to check with you one more time. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm looking for your response to...
Yes, I can.
How are you feeling today, Nicole, with this guilty plea?
I'm in shock, but I'm also I knew it was going to happen.
And in shock, meaning how? Is there relief? Is there hurt?
There's anger. This isn't closure. This isn't closure at all. This is an easy way out.
Why would you say the easy way out when perhaps it saves a trial for months and questions and evidence?
Because that's not what the family wants. The families and the friends and the loved ones and the coworkers, they all want answers. And, they want to hear from him. They want to hear, what his state of mind was, what his background was, what his motivation was. I went through this in my head last night, and I'm like, what would drive somebody to do so much damage to a community? What was his beef? What was his anger all about? I don't think this is going to be the end result in terms of closure for the family and friends. I think that this will be an ongoing grieving process, and it'll take years. It'll take years because they didn't get the answers they needed.
There will be an agreed statement of facts read out in court, and Bruce McArthur may have a chance, if he chooses, to make comments of his own. Meantime, when you say there will be years of grieving, could the years that Bruce McArthur will spend in prison alleviate any of that?
He won't last the first 25 because of his age. You know, he's an older man, so he won't last the first 25. You know, and that's just a drop in the bucket for the families. You know, it's losing a loved one to murder is, I think, 10 times worse than losing somebody to an accident.
The details that were read out in court, I'm wondering if they bring back those horrific memories. Could you describe for me the search that you tried to put on and the emotion in the gay community of Toronto at the time these men went missing, including your friend Andrew?
Well, I was the one that actually helped my roommate Greg put up posters in every park possible around the city, and it needed to be accessible. It needed to be, you know, getting on a subway and going. Every poster that I posted, I put a personal touch on it, where there's this was somebody's brother, this was somebody's son. This had meaning for families, and this is why I did what I did. We actually posted around town a lot.
Nicole, I just want to jump in for a moment and ask, are you able to hold on the phone with me while we take our viewers live in front of the courthouse? This is a member of the LGBT community, the executive director of the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention. We will listen in.
Okay.
So this is really good for closure for everyone, I think.
The experience that you touched with all the families throughout this time, can you describe what it's been like for them all this time and today? Some of them who are the
For sure, I've been in touch with most of the families, especially the Sri Lankan Tamil and with Sarusha's family, as well as Salim Essen's family. You know, it's really tough because sitting there and listening to the families sort of explain the fact that they don't know what's going on, or they don't seem to understand fully what's happening, and the fact that their loved one is gone and in such a horrific way, you know, that was the tough part. And sitting in the funerals and listening to their cries and what they're saying, it was quite challenging. But again, I think today I supported one of the families to come here, and you know, there's a sense of relief, but there's also confusion and question as to why and when and what happened.
What was it like to hear the details of what Mr. McArthur did to his victims? In some cases, he sexually assaulted them before he tied them up with ligatures, and then he dismembered them and staged the bodies.
Yeah, and I think it's different because we've already heard some of these stories as the news was breaking with the detectives coming out and talking about some of the issues. There were rumors in the community already, but just to hear it coming out of you know, out of the courtroom with the legal folks, it really settles in, and it's quite alarming that someone would actually do this to folks and agree to it, really. So it's kind of shocking and scary all at the same time, but you know, I think there's just more information to come, and I'm hoping that folks in the community and their families are seeking the supports that they necessarily need to get through this. You know, I think there's always going to be a gap, and there, you know, we for our family, for friends, for the community. I mean, we'll never get all the answers, and we'll only get it if he decides to give us that information. I think when you lose somebody and members of the community, you never really get them back. So I don't think it'll ever be over for the families, and for the community, it'll be episodic in nature in terms of their grief and their loss. And you know, we just need to step up as community members to support individuals along the way as best we can. What's missing for me, I don't know. You know, it's going to take some time to process, and what's missing, I mean, I'm grateful that the answer's there, and I'm grateful that he pleaded guilty, that he is not dragging this process on and making it difficult for everybody. I'm grateful for that, but again, it's just more stepping up and supporting the families as best as we can as they go through this grief process, and the community as well.
What do you hope the police have learned from this?
They're going to have to relive all that loss again as they put these victim impact statements together, and now that they know some of the details as well, it's going to make it that much harder for them, I would imagine. And you know, and even with Dean and speaking to some of the family members and friends of his, you know, whenever you have to recount the details and the emotions, it brings everything back up. And again, I keep going back to ensuring that those families and individuals have supports that they need to get through this part of it. And this is going to be the most difficult part, I think. And the best that we can do is be there for them and help them through this process. And I know, you know, the folks at the court, as well as the detectives, have been really supportive with the families and have given us the heads up and sort of kept us in the loop in the communication as well, so that we could be, as a community organization, supportive to folks.
Toronto police homicide was sitting in the front row of Focus Center today. There's been many that have been critical of Toronto police. The message for them on a daily basis.
I think the detectives did an amazing job. I think, you know, they were really respectful to the families and the community. But again, the challenge still remains, why did it take 10 years? And I think the challenge still remains for me around how do frontline officers get the supports that they need to do their jobs better, so that we find people sooner than later, and that it didn't have to get to this level. So, I mean, again, the independent missing persons review will answer a lot of those questions, but I'm really grateful to the detectives, and it's going to be an ongoing partnership and community building between the police and the community and these families, I'm sure.
Now in court, you and I together dozens of times in the last year, and there's always been anticipation. Today was different. Just talk about what was it like today, knowing after the police put out this release that there was going to be a significant development. Explain for you what that was like, sitting there, the anticipation waiting to hear him say guilty.
Yeah, you know, it's almost like a thriller movie, just waiting for it to happen, and it's taking forever to drag on. It's like, I just say guilty and walk off, right? And that's enough for me. But you know, I know the process is important, and the anticipation actually has just alleviated that anxiety is done. And at least we have definition, and we don't have to guess at things anymore. We know for a fact, and we have some information. Again, that helps with the healing and closure process, for sure. Yeah.
Haran, now that we have a conviction, is the conversation going to turn towards some sort of inquiry, some sort of investigating why it did take 10 years? Obviously, missing persons inquiry is not covering that. That could be part of the next step.
Yeah, so the independent review of missing persons is happening. So that's something that, you know, ASAP was a part of in the working group and furthering the terms of reference and working with a number of community organizations and individuals. I think, you know, there were talks of public inquiries before. We, as an agency, are not opposed to supporting that, but again, that would be up to the families and the community to sort of call for it if they want to. And but I think the independent review is happening now and looking at missing persons, including the 8 men, but the missing persons component of it, not necessarily the other parts of it, but definitely the missing persons. So, I mean, we're not opposed to it, but it's up to the community and the families.
Please get your name.
Oh, Haran Vijayanathan, Executive Director at the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention. Haran, Haran, V as in Victor, Ijayanathan.
And your spokesperson for
The Executive Director at the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention.
Listening right now to the Director of the Alliance for South Asian AIDS Prevention, Haran Vijayanathan, talking to reporters who are outside of that courthouse. If you are just joining us here on CBC News Network, let me bring you up to speed on the breaking news coming out of Toronto, and that is that 67-year-old Bruce McArthur has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. He preyed on men who disappeared from Toronto's gay village between the years of 2010 and 2017. Police had said that there will be a significant development development in the case this morning, and that was it. The breaking news that Bruce McArthur, who is 67 years old, did plead guilty to those 8 counts of first-degree murder. It's a series of murders that really brought a lot of emotion to Toronto, and part of that emotion are the friends of those who lost loved ones. Nicole Borthwick is in that group of people. Her friend, Andrew Kinsman, is one of the victims one of the victims that Bruce McArthur was charged with killing, to which he pleaded guilty today. Nicole, it's Suhana. Are you still on the line?
I am.
I want to ask you this. We just heard from a member of the gay community in Toronto who said that he is grateful that Bruce McArthur is not dragging this story and these murders through the courts. Now, you said you were unhappy that he pleaded guilty. I'd like to understand more about why.
Okay. Pleading guilty right away is an easy way out. You know, it's not letting the process carry through. And yes, it is painful for families, but you know, it's like putting a nail in the coffin before you put the body in. And I'm sorry to reference that, but I'm just saying that, you know, it's putting the cart before the horse. It's basically saying, yeah, I admit to my fault, I admit to my crime, let me go, I'll serve my time, but you know, without hearing detail and without hearing, you know, his mindset as to why, it's kind of like an unknown ending for a novel.
Nicole, I'm going to leave it there. And I want to thank you for sharing your stories with me of this very tumultuous time in your life, certainly as you miss your friend Andrew Kinsman. Back now in front of that courthouse in Toronto, on your screen is Karen Fraser, and we will listen in live to her reaction to the breaking news that Bruce McArthur has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder.
I know a man who's always energetic, enthusiastic, always eager to get on to the next thing, and this is just a shuffling, broken man, as he should be. As he should be.
How did you feel? How many details do you want to know? How many of the details do you want to know about what happened to your property, or would you rather not know the details?
I'd rather know than get a surprise. And things keep coming back from unexpected sources, so I'd rather just know.
Karen, what was going through your mind? As you gave a brief statement against me here, I was staging some things and killed someone.
No surprises there. I knew most of it. I didn't know about the staging. I did ask after if staging was what I thought, and apparently it is.
What is staging? What did they tell you?
Oh, well, I can't.
You can say that.
My guess is that you have a certain interest in having your victims appear a certain way. So you make that happen for your own benefit.
And did he take photographs of that?
Oh, I don't know if he took photographs. I imagine he did. I believe that's what they said. Otherwise, they wouldn't know. I'm sure.
It's been a long and very difficult year for you.
Yes.
When you heard him plead there at the end, was it surreal to kind of see this all come to this kind of conclusion here?
Surreal is so overworked. I think we need some new words. But yes, it was not normal. It was not even shocking. I guess surreal is the best we can do.
What's been the hardest part for you in this last year?
Just thinking about the last moments of those men. It comes to me quite often, particularly the 2 that I met very briefly. But I did meet 2 of them, and if I'm haunted by that, yes, I am haunted by that.
Who were the 2 that you met?
No. I'm not big on forgiveness, and I'm not big on closure. Terrible things were done.
Who were the 2 that you met?
Well, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Can you tell us what their personality they were like?
Very pleasant, very nice men. The second man, very lost, obviously not adapting to Canada very quickly. Difficulty finding his way. The other man seemed really at ease with his new life and pleasant. Humor. I'm not going to use the names. He asked what they were like, Those are the two that I met.
And how did you meet them?
Bruce McArthur brought them to my property. I never knew if he was bringing friends to see what he did for a living or because they were visiting, and that was true for some. And others did work for him, and that's why they were there.
Does that magnify the horror for you that you actually met some of these people?
I'm sorry, one at a time. I'm new at this.
How does the house feel now when you go home?
Fine. I get surprises. I'm still finding, things not where they should be because of the search, but I mean, that's to be expected. It feels fine.
Does that magnify the horror for you that you met these people?
Sorry, I think you were next.
I was just wondering, did he show enough remorse for you today? Did you get a sense that he feels some remorse?
I just saw a blank face. Obviously, he would like to keep himself to himself in the courtroom, but what does remorse look like? I only saw a blank face.
Karen, a couple months ago, Bruce McArthur's family came to your home and they
Yes.
collected the rest of his things from your home.
Yes.
In your discussions with them, what did they say? What was the reaction to everything they said?
We didn't have discussions. We had pleasant conversation. All of us well aware that it was a very difficult day for all of us. We helped them load the truck, and some conversations started to veer off in the wrong direction, and we quickly changed the subject, and they finished, the truck was closed, and they left. Oh. Sad, upset, a sense of wondering, and extremely difficult. Just, there again, that's a ridiculously simple word. Difficult isn't enough.
Does it magnify the horror? Does it magnify the horror for you that you met these people in conversation with?
I think I said that, yes, that it's harder, I'm sorry, you're referring to the family or the two gentlemen I met?
Two gentlemen you met.
Yes, of course. They're not just on a list or a photograph. They were people standing in front of me. That's much different.
Why did you want to be here today? Why did you want to be here?
I'm not sure. I debated all last night, and I thought, you have to see it through. It made it real in a proper legal sense, and for me, it felt better to be here.
Have you thought about what you're going to say in documents?
A little bit. Again, it'll run through my mind, and I have a deadline.
Could you give us a sense of what you're going to say?
What am I going to say? Well, I'm trying not to be trivial, I'll tell you that much, because I feel as if I'm a victim, I'm way at the bottom of the list. But it's supposed to be my impact, so I will talk about the things that bothered me, even if they were small. It was my life, it was my partner's life, so if it bothered us, then to us it was important.
Is it hard, Karen, for you to reconcile the fact that this man who was storing his tools at your house in your garage, during that time, police now say, and he's been charged and pled guilty to killing and dismembering these men. When you think back, does that haunt you that you didn't really know?
I think there's a lot of people we don't really know, obviously not quite the split. I mean, how many of us have had the shock of the bon vivant husband in the neighborhood who behind closed doors is abusing his family? That is hardly unusual in Canada, and yet we never saw the difference.
What was he like? Can you just tell us what kind of man he was?
We call it Bruce A and Bruce B. Bruce A was a man who seemed to have made decisions about his life and was very happy with them. He enjoyed his job, he enjoyed his clients, never got bored with the plants. He was very talented at it. He was very fond of his children. He was a great grandfather. I remember having an argument with him. I had just bought a decorated cake in Thorncliffe for $60, and he had paid $250 to get one for his granddaughter, who was far too small to even look at the cake. But, for his grandchildren, everything. He was the best friend, neighbor, relative that anyone could want. That was Bruce A. Bruce B, who was that? I don't know.
You didn't know it existed?
No, Nope, never saw temper. He was rarely sarcastic. No, just a happy guy, working hard, moving fast. You would never, ever think. And I believe all his other clients said the same thing. Well, I'm told he's not mentally ill, but to me, he's evil. And there was a book a long time ago about Colin Thatcher, who was convicted of killing his wife, and the author said he is not mentally abnormal in any sense that we have, but he was evil. And that always stayed with me, and it came back to me when all of this started. No. He obviously doesn't care. Why would anyone bother?
Do you feel
That's my
violated?
view.
They used your property in the way you did?
Oh, of course we feel violated. It's our home. Talk about an abusive friendship. Yes, of course we feel violated. It'll take a long time before that backyard is back together. But the wonderful people from the Metropolitan Community Church did come. They volunteered, they came, and they replanted the backyard. So we're on our way to being better. So if that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your last name,
Fraser.
Karen?
What's your last name?
With an S.
Thank you.
Fraser, no I.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are listening live here to Karen Fraser. She is the owner of that home in Midtown Toronto where police did find the remains of Bruce McArthur's victims. If you are just joining us here on CBC News Network, I'm Suhanna Marchand. I want to thank you for joining us. We are tracking breaking news in that Bruce McArthur, who is 67, today walked into court or shuffled into court in his handcuffs and shackles and pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. The shot we're showing you right now is live outside the Toronto courthouse where a bank of microphones has been set up. We are going to get you reaction as soon as it happens. We just heard from Karen Fraser, who is the homeowner of that home in Midtown Toronto where McArthur worked. He was a self-employed landscaper, and police found remains in planters at that home. They also found remains of one of the victims in a ravine nearby. In all, Bruce McArthur says today, or agreed today, that he killed 8 people. He will go to prison for 25 years minimum, and if he gets that life sentence consecutively, it would be up to 200 years. That sentencing, by the way, goes next week on February 4th on Monday. We've got this story covered in many ways. Megan Fitzpatrick is standing by live outside the courthouse. I've got Karen McArthur, no relation. She is a Toronto defense lawyer right here in studio. She's been watching these events unfold and giving us a sense of what's happening behind the scenes and why things happen. Let's go right now to in front of that courthouse where Megan Fitzpatrick is standing by. Lots of emotion. We talked about that earlier, Megan, and we did hear today words describing McArthur as evil, others saying they are very glad that it's not going to trial. What else are you hearing there in front of the courthouse?
Yeah, so far we've heard from 2 speakers, Suhanna. One was Haran, who was quite a vocal advocate for the LGBTQ community in Toronto. He's been following this case very closely. He's been supporting a lot of the families and friends of the victims. So he was in the courtroom when it happened, and he was describing for us what it was like for him, how emotional it was, and how he's grateful that he used that word, that Bruce McArthur did plead guilty to all 8 counts and that this will not be going to trial. But he also talked about how difficult this is, obviously, for the community, healing going forward, hearing some of the details that were read out in court in terms of what happened to the victims, how some of the murders were sexual in nature as well. Talked about how that was difficult to hear, even though he had a sense already of what had happened to some of these men. He said it was still shocking and disturbing to hear it in court firsthand. And then just a second ago, Suhanna, we were listening to Karen Fraser, who is the homeowner of where the remains of the 8 men were found, most of them in large garden planters that were in her garage. The remains of the 8th victim found in the ravine beside her home. Bruce McArthur is someone she knew for more than a decade, and she was describing how she now refers to Bruce A and Bruce B. Bruce A being the man that she thought she knew, and she really was painting a portrait of the man that she knew, Suhanna, describing him as someone who was energetic and enthusiastic, had a sarcastic sense of humor, how she used to talk to him about his grandkids. She had a personal friendship with this man. She even mentioned that she met two of the victims. So we learned that as well, and so she just talked about how, when you see the names of the victims and their faces, they're not just names on a list. She actually personally met two of the victims, and so she was talking a bit about that. It was also interesting to hear her say that she is not someone who's big on forgiveness. And so that was one thing she said, and also just in terms of closure, she said there never really will be any closure. So that was a bit about what we've heard so far. We're also expecting to hear from the two key detectives that were the leads on this case. They should be coming out fairly shortly. We know they were in the courtroom, as well as upwards of a dozen other Toronto police officers who worked on the case as well. So it was a packed courtroom in there this morning when Bruce McArthur did plead guilty to all 8 counts of first-degree murder. So we're just waiting now to hear from those police officers, Suhanna, and then after them, perhaps any other friends of some of the victims who were in the courtroom this morning.
Thanks for that, Megan. We'll go back to you there live in front of the courthouse. I mentioned we're covering this story from many angles. Getting inside the mind of a defense attorney, Karen McCarthy, is right here. She's a criminal defense lawyer. Karen, one of the things that Megan and I were discussing earlier was not only will Bruce McArthur go to prison for a minimum of 25 years, which is life, or if he gets consecutive on 8 counts of pleading guilty, 200 years, which he won't live through till, but the victim impact statements will help a judge decide on that sentence. How important are they?
I don't think they're as important for the determination of the sentence as they are for bringing an aspect of closure and healing and helping the victims and their families offset the very significant impacts of trauma from even hearing about what's happened to their loved ones.
Going to get back to that question. Taking our viewers right now to in front of the courthouse. This is the lead investigator, Hank Idzinga. We'll listen in live.
The culmination of a tremendous amount of work on the part of the investigative team from the Toronto Police Service. Many members of Project Prism and Project Houston are here today, and I thank them for their perseverance. There has also been some incredible work completed in the past year by the team of Crown attorneys assigned to the case, and we are very grateful. I would also like to thank all members of the service who played a role, no matter how big or small, to help us to get to this point in the process. We would not be here today if not for the work of Detective David Dickinson of the Homicide Squad. His work during Project Prism and his work preparing the case for court has been outstanding. I am flattered to be able to introduce him to you, and he will be the one to provide any further comments.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. I just want to recap today by saying at approximately 10 a.m. this morning, Bruce McArthur attended the Superior Court of Justice here in Toronto, at which time he pled guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. That was for the murders of Skandaraj Navaratnam, Abdul Bazir Faizi, Majid Kayan, Sarush Mahmoodi, Krishna Kedannaratnam, Dean Lisowick, Salim Essen, and Andrew Kinsman. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize and acknowledge the family and friends of the victims in this case. It has been a long and traumatic process, and many made the difficult decision to attend in person today. Our thoughts are with the victims, their loved ones, and the community as a whole. We would not be here if not for the assistance provided during this investigation by all of them. We, myself, and the investigative team are pleased that Mr. McArthur has pled guilty today, sparing the community and those who knew the victims a lengthy trial. I believe that this is the best possible outcome for the families and the community. This process is not over. As His Honor stated, we will be back next month to move forward with submissions for sentencing. And that will be also the opportunity for victim impact statements to be introduced. At this point, this is not over. I will take some procedural questions right now, but I will not answer anything as it relates directly to the investigation.
Dave, can you tell us What does it mean when we hear that Macarthur staged his victims?
Again, Catherine, that's an investigative type question. I'm sure we will hear more about that next week in court, but I'm not going to talk about that now.
Dave, can you just talk about the moment up there?
What you've seen, people you talk to, what you've lived. How does it feel like to be in that courtroom this morning?
Mixed feelings. I'm hoping it's closure for a lot of people. I'm hoping it's starting that process towards closure. We unfortunately can never bring these men back, but I'm hoping we can start bringing some closure to the families and the communities.
What does it mean to your fellow officers, fellow detectives, to be at this point after what has been a very difficult year?
This isn't about us. I am very proud of my investigative team. I'm very proud of the officers that I worked along with. I will say that if it wasn't for them, I don't think we would be here today. But again, this isn't about us. This is about the murdered 8 men.
Do you know why he would have pled guilty? Do you have any indication why he agreed to plead guilty?
I'll comment on that at a later time. I'm not going to do that right now.
Detective, obviously you were looking at other cases, potentially other missing persons that could have been attributed to Mr. Macarthur. Is that work ongoing, or is that closed now with this release?
Absolutely not. That will continue. Like I've said before to many of you, I'm not sure if there is a day that'll go by that I won't make a note in my book. This investigation will continue, and we will continue to look at any other possible connections that anyone may have had to Bruce McArthur.
Considering the sheer number of cases you're looking at, does this investigation?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe one day down the road, but it's not ending anytime soon.
Dave, did you ever see today happening? Take it back to a year ago when the arrest was made. You had him charged with 2 counts. Here we are a year later. How has this year been for you? And are you just describe what it's been like going through this?
It's been busy. It's like I said, I'm trying to comprehend it now. It's a lot of emotions. Obviously, sadness. There's some closure for me too as well today. It's been tough on my family. It's been tough on the entire team's family. But again, we do this for we did this for the family. We did this for the communities. People wanted answers. I'm hoping that we brought some of those answers to them.
This one goes in the win column. This one goes in the win column for you. Why does it feel like such a win?
Well, I'm not saying it's a win. It's Bruce McArthur has pled guilty, and that's closure. I'm not considering it a win. It's it's the right outcome. It's the outcome. It's the right outcome.
Have other jurisdictions?
Get a sense of why he did this?
Wendy, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know why. And I'm not going to comment further on that right now.
Have other jurisdictions reached out to you and tried to link McArthur?
Yes, we've been in contact for years with multi-jurisdictional, and we continue to liaise with them.
Detective, you mentioned that you think this is the best outcome. Is that just because people will be spared having to go through the daily details of a trial to get all that stuff out there? Is it just best to avoid all that for people?
Yes. There's multiple reasons. One, we're concluding this now or in the next couple weeks as opposed to years. What happened today was a sure thing, 8 pleas of first-degree murder for the 8 murdered men. It wasn't, possible seconds, it wasn't manslaughters, it was 8 firsts. It was sparing the community and sparing more so the family members of, potentially seeing graphic evidence tendered to court.
Are you seeking consecutive or concurrent?
I'm not commenting on what the Crown's seeking. I don't know.
Any concessions given to McArthur in exchange for a guilty plea?
Nothing I'm going to comment on. That's not my area.
Speaking only to the agreed statement of facts that's been today, is that information all from investigators?
Again, nothing. I'm not going to comment on that right now.
You worked really closely with the families involved in this. Did you have
Yes, we did. Not just myself, the whole investigative team, the whole Crown Attorney's office. We've established a relationship with some of these families for up to 7 years. Members of my investigative team have been communicating with these family members, friends for 7 years. So we have a good rapport with them. we've been helping them through the process. I don't really know how to answer specifically, but we've been going through the process, sitting at their dining room table, sitting at their kitchen table, sharing hard information. It's tough notifying them that, confirmations that, we do have their loved ones' remains, but we got through it, and we're going to continue to support them, in the years to come.
Dave, we've heard that 3 days are being set aside next week to read out the lengthy agreed statement of facts and go through victim impact statements. How many victim impact statements do you think we could hear from either live or read out?
I don't know the numbers, Catherine. I suspect it'll be at least a couple dozen.
Detective, now that you know the conviction back, can you give us some lessons learned? You now have the benefit of almost a decade.
Now is not the time for that. There will be a time down the road that I will answer investigative type questions and reflect, but today, right now, is not the time.
Do you think there should be a public inquiry?
There's an inquest going on, and I think, if there were mistakes made or lessons learned, absolutely, we should learn from them.
What lesson should we learn when a community says there's a serial killer on the prowl? Should we continue to dismiss them? Should we look into it a little more than we usually do? After 10 years, what's your lesson on that one?
Well, I will say again, if there were mistakes made, that we should learn from them and see what those mistakes were made and move forward.
Your officers saw quite a bit when going through the backyard, doing excavating and all that kind of stuff. Now that we've kind of reached pretty close to the end here, how do your officers personally kind of move on and take care of themselves?
We take care of ourselves by being with each other, by supporting each other. We've gone through this together. We talk, we speak to each other and converse and make sure that we're all taken care of. They're all standing behind me back here. A lot of them are, and like I said, this isn't about us, but no, we did this because we wanted answers too, and I hope we brought some closure. Okay, thank you, everybody.
We just heard there from David Dickinson, detective, one of the lead investigators on the case of Bruce McArthur and those missing men in Toronto's gay community. It's been quite a morning of breaking news, and you've caught it all right here on CBC News Network. Let me bring you up to speed with what we know so far and what we can share with you as you follow us on television. This morning at 10 o'clock, Bruce McArthur, 67 years old, shuffled into court in handcuffs and shackles and pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. Those 8 counts all related to men who went missing in Toronto's gay community in the downtown part of the city. There had been searches. There had been a lot of contention and friction between the gay community and police in the way that investigation unfolded. And today, it seems that investigation ended when Bruce McArthur 8 times in court said guilty as the court clerk read out the charges for each individual first-degree murder charge. What happens now is next week on Monday, February 4th, there will be a sentencing hearing. 2 options. A judge can either go consecutive or concurrent. We know it's going to be a life sentence, minimum of 25 years, maximum of 200, which he will never survive. 25 years would put him at about 92 years old if he were to get parole, or when he would get parole at that time. The other thing that we're going to hear next week, and this is the perhaps the most emotional part of the sentencing, and that is the victim impact statements. There will be, sorry for the bars there, but we're leaving that court live shot. The victim impact statements will be read out by those who are family members or those who lost friends among that group of 8, and they will share their what is in their heart, I suppose, and that is what will be read out in court. So we'll also be finding more. One of the things that interested me is something that Detective David Dickinson said, and I have criminal defense lawyer Karen Macarthur right here in studio, and thank you for letting me pick your brain and understand not only the process, but the ramifications of this plea. I thought, okay, you plead guilty, everything's over, the investigation is over. And then David Dickinson comes to the microphone there and talks with reporters and says the investigation is not over. We're hearing they could be looking at former cold cases and others who perhaps have been reported as missing. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me, and it's the right thing to do in the search for justice and the search for truth. We know that for the better part of a decade, the police didn't connect all the dots here for the 8 missing men. And so given that is the case, given that Bruce McArthur is now an admitted serial killer, it is absolutely the right thing to do, to keep digging with the shovel, as it were, through the dirt, reaching out to other jurisdictions and exploring cold cases, and perhaps finding other victims of Bruce McArthur.
Today, the fact that Bruce McArthur pled guilty to those 8 counts, he stood up in court and he said guilty, guilty 8 times. What does that save? And you've been in this position, I suppose, where clients have pleaded guilty. What does that save not only the community, but the court and the public, if you will?
It saves a very prolonged trial. This one would have gone at least 4 to 5 months. It spares everyone the possibility that a judge determined that 1 or more of the 8 counts, he was only responsible for 2nd-degree murder or manslaughter because he did it in an episodic rage or in a drug-induced state, or it wasn't planned and deliberate. So this is an absolutely surefire thing, and it brings closure right here and now. It doesn't bring closure in terms of the pain to the heart and the trauma that the victims' families are going through, the Toronto community, and the detectives, the Crowns, and the defense lawyers. Everybody that's been up close and personal with the facts of this case is forever changed, traumatized.
We're going to hear some of that trauma in those victim impact statements, which are set, by the way, for Monday, February 4th. That is before the sentencing hearing. What impact does that statement have when it comes to a judge deciding sentencing? And what is the purpose of it?
There is very limited scope for Justice McMahon to do anything other than send this man away for the rest of his natural life. Look, if he's eligible for parole at the age of 92, it's only he's eligible for parole. Then a parole hearing has to be held if he only receives a concurrent sentence on all 8 counts as opposed to consecutive. So really, Justice McMahon doesn't have a choice here. Bruce McArthur will, in all likelihood, die in prison. Probably sooner rather than later, because he won't fit in very well in prison given the horrors of his crimes. What the victim impact system statements do is it allows for participatory, democratic sentencing, as it were, so that many voices can fill the hallowed halls of justice and people can feel that they have a stake in our justice system. Because after all, the justice system is a tool that we human beings have devised to allow us collectively to determine truth and separate it from fiction, but also to allow us to understand Bruce A and Bruce B, to understand the evil side of human nature, and to allow us somehow to come to closure, if it's at all possible. And it's across a broad spectrum. Some people will be able to forgive and forget and move on, and some people, notwithstanding participating in the victim statement, will become ever more bitter. But at least it is a forum in which victims' families who have been affected by this can have a voice within our justice system.
Is there a chance of an appeal when someone pleads guilty, stands up in court and says, I knowingly plead guilty, I voluntarily pass on a trial? Is there any wiggle room in there?
Very, very limited scope for wiggle room. I would, first of all, Judge McMahon did the entire inquiry with Bruce McArthur, which he did on the record, and then he admitted responsibility for each of the 8 counts of first-degree murder. A snippet of the statement of facts was read into court this morning. No doubt the defense counsel, on behalf of Mr. McArthur, said, yes, Your Honor, those facts as they're read in are correct. And then normally, Bruce McArthur is asked as well, and he will nod or say yes, and this will continue through on Monday. You quite often will also see that the accused signs the agreed statement of facts. So that's an additional hold on you.
I do want to ask you about this agreed statement of facts. It was read into the records.
A bit of it today.
A bit of it, and it's horrific. we were hearing, and I should give our viewers a warning, that some of the descriptions in that agreed statement of facts you may find disturbing. But as I understand it, Karen, it includes the fact that the Crown summary says Bruce McArthur took photos of his victims, that in his apartment police found a bag containing a syringe and duct tape and other items which he used, they say, to confine his victims. We do know that all of those were sex-related crimes. We do know, and this is information that you've read in the months gone by, that the bodies of the victims were dismembered, some of them found in planters in a home in Midtown Toronto, other parts of one of the victims found in a ravine nearby. We also know that Bruce McArthur kept some mementos, jewelry, and notebooks. What happens to that agreed statement of facts, and who has access to it?
It becomes part of the public record. It was read in today. A court reporter transcribes it, and it is publicly available. Our court system is premised on it being open, part of the democracy aspect to it, and that will continue through on Monday. It may well be that photos or notebooks, if there was anything private written in by a deceased, a victim, are subject to privacy concerns and are shelved off so that the media can't have access to those. But in the normal course, open.
All right. I just want to correct something. I think I may have said all of them were sex-related crimes, as I believe it's 6 of those 8 fall into that category. Karen, I want to thank you very much. You've allowed us not only a perspective of what's going on in the courtroom, but also the emotion of this story, because you cannot separate the murder of 8 people in one community of a city from what is felt in the heart. It is a story of incredible emotion, and you've helped us to understand the process and the emotion. So thank you very much. Criminal defense lawyer Karen Macarthur for here in studio.
You're very welcome.
We've got CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick outside of that courthouse in Toronto where all of this happened today. Lots of developments, Megan. I've brought our viewers up to speed in the fact that Bruce McArthur pled guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder, that he voluntarily waived his right to a trial, and that he will be taken back to prison. Walk me through the next stages.
Well, the next stage will be the sentencing hearing, Suhanna, which is set to begin on February 4th. And that could take several days because part of that hearing will include victim impact statements. And we were just hearing from one of the lead detectives on the case. He was asked how many victim impact statements he thinks there might be. And he didn't have an exact number, but there will be quite a few. So it could take some time for those all to be read into the court. So that will be again, a very emotional day, of course, for everyone impacted by this case, friends and family of the victims, as well as the homeowners as well, where the remains of the 8 men were found. Karen Fraser saying she's thought about giving a victim impact statement. She said she knows she's low down in terms of who you classify as a victim, but so she was saying she doesn't really consider herself a victim in the same way, but definitely how her life has been impacted, and so she's been giving some thought towards what she might say in court. But part of the legal proceeding will include the judge deciding whether to give Bruce McArthur consecutive or concurrent sentences. A first-degree murder charge does come with an automatic life sentence of 25 years with no chance of parole. But given that he is now pleaded guilty to 8 counts, the question will be whether those sentences are served concurrently or consecutively. So that will be up to the judge to decide. And so that will be the next phase of what happens after today, Suhanna, him coming back to court. I'm not sure if it'll be at this exact courthouse or somewhere else where that hearing takes place, but that will be the next phase of this legal proceeding. Given that he pleaded guilty today, there will be no trial. It was last fall that he waived his right to a preliminary hearing, which in some ways fast-tracked the case, and he had been making some court appearances in recent weeks. Those were all sort of pre-trial meetings, and what was happening was his defense lawyer as well as the Crown attorneys and the judge were meeting to discuss what evidence had been gathered, where things were at, timelines. And he had not entered a plea yet to those 8 charges that were laid last year until today. So now no trial at all. It had been set for January of 2020, but of course that won't take place now. Now the next phase is the sentencing hearing for Bruce McArthur.
Thanks for that, Megan. You've done a great job in keeping us on track as to what was happening in front of that courthouse, keeping us up to date on all of the reaction, and also in touch with our colleagues as to what was going on inside the courthouse. Thanks for that. That's CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick. She is in Toronto. We've been tracking breaking news for you here on CBC News Network, and I hope you've been with us through all of it. But if you are just tuning in right now, I can tell you that across the country, the name Bruce McArthur is known, perhaps not more so than in Toronto, where the 67-year-old today pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. There were 8 men who went missing in Toronto's gay community in the downtown core. There was a lot of friction between the community and police when it came to investigating those reports of men who were missing. Today, perhaps there is some end to it, because Bruce McArthur walked into court with his handcuffs shackled before a judge. As the clerk read out each of those 8 counts, he said guilty, guilty, guilty 8 times. This means that Bruce McArthur will be going to prison for life. The sentencing hearing comes on Monday of next week. It is an automatic life sentence. The question is it concurrent or is it consecutive? Here's what perhaps doesn't end, and this came from one of the lead detectives on the case, Detective David Dickinson, who described it as a long and traumatic process. He said while the police were pleased and the outcome was right that Bruce McArthur pleaded guilty, he says, I don't know if we'll ever know why. And perhaps that's one of the questions many in the community do want answered. Also, that police investigation is not closed. Police will now go back and look at other cold cases of perhaps people who are missing in the gay community. Are there connections? This is speculation on my part, but there are questions. Are there connections? Will police continue to open those files and see if perhaps there are links to anything that they have seen happen in court today? This is CBC News Network. We've got you covered on breaking news, and we'll bring you more news right after this break.